بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا وإمامنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أما بعد. We left off on page 22 in the Arabic text, speaking on the shurut, the conditions of that which is called al-khabar al-mutawatir. Al-khabar al-mutawatir, the report which is mutawatir. What report is considered to be mutawatir? That was our last lesson. And we mentioned four main conditions. The author said, first and foremost, with regards to the abundance, and for this abundance to be found in every level of the isnad. Number three, the author says, أن تحيل العادة تواطؤهم على الكذب, is that this abundance of narrators, 10 narrators, 15 narrators, 20 narrators, 12 narrators, 40 narrators, that is found in every tabaqah, in other words, at least 15 sahaba, at least 10 sahaba, at least 30 of the tabi'een, 40 of the atba' tabi'een, until the hadith becomes collected in a book and passed into mass circulation. This kathra, this abundance, this mass of narrators, it must be so many people that is strong enough and powerful enough to totally exclude the possibility of it being a lie. It must totally exclude the possibility of it being a lie. In other words, there's so many narrators is that it's impossible for it to be kadhib. And the author says, if there's an abundant amount of narrators, but it doesn't exclude the possibility of a lie, then it is not classified as al-mutawatir. This is what the author says. Before we move forward, we have to understand what's meant by this text. The author says, أن تحيل العادة تواطؤهم على الكذب, is that in the aada, in most cases, it can't be a lie because it's an abundance of people who reported the same narration. And we understand from the opposite is that if it doesn't exclude the possibility of lying, then it is not considered to be mutawatir. Is this condition acceptable? Is it accepted or is it rejected? Is it questionable? Is it absolutely applicable or is it only applied in restricted situations? Not to go too deep and not to move ahead too fast or too quickly of our elementary level that we're on right now, is a very important note, and that is, can we say this with regards to the first tabaqah, being the tabaqah of the Sahaba? Can we say that it has to be a large number of Sahaba, so large that it's impossible, in most cases, fil aada, that it is kadhib? Can we say that? Will the Sahaba even come together to conjure a lie against the Prophet ﷺ, intentionally or unintentionally? So that in itself is problematic. That's all the time we want to spend on that condition right now. Jim. Oh, he says, Del. أن يكون مستند خبرهم الحس. The third condition of the mutawatir report is that the foundation, the asl, the mustanad, what they're relying upon in their narration and report has to be one of the five senses. It has to be something that they saw, something that they heard. It has to be something which is mahsus, palpable, tangible. And it can't be I thought or I felt, not meaning feeling with the hands, but actually feeling with one's feelings, with one's mind, with one's imagination. It has to be something that is mahsus. It has to be something that 500 people, 300 people, 200 people, 30 sahaba, 30 tabi'een, 30 atba' tabi'een, 30 of the atba' atba', they have to report that is going back to hiss. It has to be something sensible. Khairan inshallah. The fourth and final, that was the fourth and final condition. He says here, كقولهم سمعنا أو رأينا أو لمسنا. أما إن كان مستند خبرهم العقل كالقول بحدوث العالم مثلا أو العالم مثلا فلا يسمى الخبر حينئذ متواترا. He says this means for them to say, we heard, we saw, we felt something, meaning physically felt something. As far as if they say, then it's based off of one's aql, one's mind. Such as what people say, huduth al-alam, that the world is new. The world came into being, whether you say the Big Bang Theory or other than that. Huduth al-alam or qidam al-alam. What's important is, he says that it has to be something that is tangible and palpable in order for it to be called mutawatir. The third section, the author says, حكمه المتواتر يفيد العلم الضروري أي اليقين الذي يضطر الإنسان إلى التصديق به تصديقا جازما كمن يشاهد الأمر بنفسه كيف لا يتردد في تصديقه فكذلك الخبر المتواتر لذلك كان المتواتر كله مقبولا ولا حاجة إلى البحث عن أحوال رواته. The third section is the ruling of al-mutawatir. When there is a report which is classified mutawatir, which is scientifically graded and classed as mutawatir, what does it give us? What does it prove? What is the hukm of it? Now, and obviously, we're not talking about the dilala. We're not talking about the dilala. We're talking about the concept of what it gives us as far as its grade. All right? How to use it and understand it is a different story. He says that al-mutawatir gives that which is called ilm dururi. Ilm dururi, which means it's a knowledge which is irrefutable, conclusive knowledge. It is a knowledge which is total and absolute. It's a total and absolute type of knowledge. Certainty which cannot be rejected and repelled. Certainty which cannot be rejected, nor can it be repelled. As if the person himself saw the thing or heard the thing. So many people have talked about it. So many people have explained it. So many people have reported it. Is that it forces a wedge into your mind and into your heart of absolute and pure solid certainty. As if you yourself are looking at it and seeing it with your own two eyes or your own two ears, or feeling it with your own two hands, with your own fingertips, your own fingerprints. The author, he says here, for this reason, all of mutawatir is maqbool, he says. There's no such thing as a hadith being mutawatir, that's mardu, that's rejected. All of it is totally, absolutely accepted. This is what the author says, because it gives total and absolute knowledge. Khairan inshallah. Fourth section, he says, أقسامه ينقسم الخبر المتواتر إلى قسمين هما لفظي ومعنوي. What are the types of mutawatir? And what are the categories of al-mutawatir? Number one, he says, is that which is mutawatir lafdhiyan. That which is mutawatir in the wording itself is not paraphrased, but it's verbatim, word for word. Or very closely, comes very close to word for word. Paraphrased just a bit. But it's one sentence, one statement, one cliche, which is constantly repeated over and over again, and everybody knows it and they say it in the exact same way, or in a way which is very, very, very close and very, very similar. And the second is called ma'nawi, which basically means that it's paraphrased. The meaning of the report is mutawatir. There's so many hadiths on this one thing that the Prophet did that the Muslim has no doubt. The Muslim cannot reject. The Muslim cannot repel the reality that the Prophet ﷺ did this or this thing happened during the time of prophecy. For example, the author is going to explain bidnai ta'ala. He says, مثل حديث من كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار راه بضعة وسبعون صحابيا. An example of this is a hadith that says, anyone who lies on me, anyone who intentionally invents a lie against me, he should take his seat in the fire of hell. He should take his seat in the fire of hell. He says this hadith has been reported by over 70 companions. Over 70 companions who reported this same statement. With a few discrepancies, as we said, a few minor variations, as we said. من قال علي من لم أقل أو من لم أقل من تقوى علي ما لم أقل من كذب علي متعمدا. They all reported, the Prophet ﷺ basically said, if you lie on me, you're going to go to hell. If you lie on me, you're going to go to hell. The specific wordings, man ta'ammada, man taqawwala, one basic, clearly, closely reported wording. Khayran, inshallah, over 70 companions reported this hadith. He says, so this is an example of that which we call mutawatir lafzi. The author then says, ba al-mutawatir al-ma'nawi, وهو ما تواتر معناه دون لفظه مثل أحاديث رفع اليدين في الدعاء فقد ورد عنه صلى الله عليه وسلم نحو 100 حديث كل حديث منها في أنه رفع يديه في الدعاء لكنها في قضايا مختلفة فكل قضية منها لم تتواتر والقدر المشترك بينهما هو الرفع عند الدعاء تواتر باعتبار مجموع الطرق. He says here, the second is that which is reported in verbatim, that which is the general meaning, not the specific wording. An example of this is when the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands when making dua. The Prophet ﷺ, he raised his hands when he made dua. It's reported in different instances, different battles, different hardships, trials and tribulations, different locations. But it all proves one thing, that the Prophet raised his hands when he made dua. He says there are over or approximately 100 hadiths stating this. So each hadith by itself is not necessarily mutawatir. Each instance or happening is not necessarily mutawatir. But he says collectively it proves that the person raised his hands without any doubt. And that itself is mutawatir ma'nawi. I'm sure if the Muslim would sit down and just think about the different hadiths, the different happenings, the different incidences, things like this, he could find, or he can put together a notebook of examples. Moving forward, number 5, the 5th section, he says, وجوده يوجد عدد لا بأس به من الأحاديث المتواترة منها حديث الحوض وحديث المسح على الخفين وحديث رفع اليدين في الصلاة وحديث نضر الله امرأ وغيرها كثير لكن لو نظرنا إلى عدد أحاديث الأحادي لوجدنا أن الأحاديث المتواترة قليلة جدا بالنسبة لها. He says the existence of this type of hadith or these types of hadith, very important concept when you're studying something. Is it existent? Is it in existence? Is it rare? Is it scarce? Is it theoretical or is it actually practical? Does it actually exist? Are you going to come across a hadith like this? Are you going to come across a ruling like this? A fatwa. Is that even something that should be studied? Is it actually going to happen, going to take place? Is it mawjood, or is it something which is extinct, or it doesn't exist, or it's totally theoretical and totally hypothetical? He says here that there's a good portion of ahadith which are mutawatira that can be found. Good portion of them. He doesn't say the majority of the hadiths. He doesn't say a swollen portion, a huge number. He says, la ba's bihi. Okay portion, such as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ's hawd. Whether you translate the word hawd to mean his pond, his pool, his fountain, and hereafter on the day of judgment he will have a hawd, however you translate it, and people will drink from it. And the Prophet told us about the number of its gauntlets, how many vessels there will be, like the stars in the sky. He says this water will be whiter than milk. It will be sweeter than honey. And anyone who takes a drink from that hawd, from that pond or that pool, will never ever become thirsty again. Allahu Akbar. And that's before the people even go to Jannah. May Allah make us of those who drink from that hawd. So therefore, he says these hadith are mutawatirah. He says also the hadith of wiping over the leather socks. That the Prophet wiped over his leather socks. He told people to wipe over their leather socks. Allow people to wipe over their leather socks. He says in the hadith of raising the hands in the salah, when to raise the hands in the salah. Is it from the sunnah to raise your hands or is it a bid'ah? What do we do? When do we raise our hands in the salah? The first takbirah, going to ruku', coming out of ruku', coming out of the third rak'ah. Al-muhim, he says, raf' al-yadayn, raising the hands. Not getting into the specifics of this issue. But some people may think or feel or say that it's not from the sunnah to raise your hands in the salah at all, mutlaqan. He then says, or the hadith that states, may Allah bless the man, may Allah brighten the face of the woman, may Allah give splendor and joy to one who hears my hadith, We all know he says he memorizes it, he passes it on to others just as he heard it. He says these hadith are mutawatira. In other words, the hadith that give a glad tidings to Ahlul Hadith, to the people of Hadith. He says here, وَغَيْرُهَا, and many, many others. Many others. He says, however, when we make a comparison between the hadith which are mutawatira and the hadith which are ahad, he says, then it's a very, very small amount, very tiny amount, very insignificant amount. The percentage is like not worth mentioning, he says, with regards to the hadith which are ahad. And as it's going to come later on, b'idhnillahi ta'ala, what's meant by khabar ahad, or khabar al-wahid? That is anything that isn't mutawatir, according to the author, and according to those other ulama of past and of present who held the view of the whole concept of mutawatir and ahad. So he says here that this the amount of hadith mutawatir is very small, all right, very limited number. That's extremely important once you start progressing and maturing and moving up the ladder and studying the different books of al-mustalah and the different books of ilm al-rijal and things like this. When you start to realize that which is theoretical and that which is practical, that which exists and that which doesn't, that which is beneficial in the battlefield and that which you study and learn in a dojo. And there's a difference between the two. And many people mix between the two. Khairan, inshallah, the sixth section, and it's the final section of this, speaking about mutawatir, the author says, أشهر المصنفات فيه. He says the most popular books regarding ahadith mutawatira. The most popular books regarding a topic. Whenever you study something and you want to learn something, it's very important to understand what are the authored works. What are the important books? What's the flagship of this whole issue? Who's the first person to write a hadith, write a book on it? Who has the biggest book? Who has the most extensive book? Who has the easiest book and the simplest book? All right. When did this idea become or go into circulation and become widespread? It's very important to know what books are available on the topic. Which are good books, which are bad, which are thorough books, which books are a little sloppy, which books are summarized, which books are extensive, and the list goes on. That's very important for the student of knowledge. Moving forward, the author, he says, لقد اعتنى العلماء بجمع الأحاديث المتواترة وجعلها في مصنف مستقل ليسهل على الطالب الرجوع إليها. فمن تلك المصنفات, he says, no doubt the ulama have given a great deal of importance to this topic and to compile all hadith which are mutawatir in one place, put them in one work, one folder, one binder, for the purpose of the one who wants to read about them and study them and benefit from them to come across them easily and simply. All right? He says it's something that the ulama of Islam have given a great deal of importance to. From these books, from the most famous of these books, he says, أولا or ألف الأزهار المتناثرة في الأخبار المتواترة للسيوطي وهو مرتب على الأبواب. The first book is called Al-Azhar al-Mutanathira. He says a book called Al-Azhar al-Mutanathira, which basically is a work of Jalaluddin as-Suyuti, who died in the year 911, in which he's talking about these hadith which are mutawatira, and it is alphabetically ordered or arranged. باء قطف الأزهار للسيوطي أيضا وهو تلخيص للكتاب السابق. As-Suyuti wrote another book called قطف الأزهار, which is a summary of the previous work. So we find As-Suyuti, he wrote a book, and then he summarized the book. جيم نظم المتناثر من الأحاديث أو من الحديث المتواتر لمحمد بن جعفر الكتاني. The third work is called نظم المتناثر, which is a book by Muhammad ibn Ja'far al-Kittani, in which he put together the different works, or he put together different hadiths to deal with the narrations which are called or claimed to be mutawatira. Before we go forward, obviously the books that speak about mutawatir hadith are going to be limited because the hadiths themselves are limited. Let alone the fact that most of these books, 9 out of 10, are going to be books of scholars who came way later on, and the reasons behind that. whether it's because the ulama of the past really didn't give a great deal of importance to this topic, or because it was something that didn't exist in their vocabulary. Khairan, inshallah. Let's move forward. The author says, Al-Mabhath al-Thani, Khabar al-Ahad. He says the second thing that we want to discuss in this chapter is that which is called Khabar al-Ahad, the hadith which are not mutawatira. أولا تعريفه ألف لغة الآحاد جمع أحد بمعنى الواحد وخبر الواحد هو ما يرويه شخص واحد باء اصطلاحا هو ما لم يجمع شروط المتواتر. First and foremost is just the definition of the term ahad. As we always do, we always try to explain, we always try to mention, is to define the term, to understand the term, to know the language, to know what's being said, to understand where a thing comes from, its original derivation, where is it derived from, where is it taken from, how does it branch off. He says the word ahad is the plural of the word ahad. And the word ahad means wahid, meaning one, meaning soul, meaning singular. And it is the khabar, he says, it's the report that's only given by one person. That's only given to one person. He says that's lughatan in the Arabic language. And nothing to do with the sciences of hadith, the terminology of hadith. He says, but that's just dealing with the lugha al-Arabiya, the Arabic language. So ahad is that which is reported by one person. As far as its meaning in the sciences of hadith, in the mustalah of hadith, the language of the traditionalists or the traditionalists, the muhaddithin al-hadith, according to the author, he says it is the report that does not gather, that does not reach the grade of mutawatir. It does not reach the level of mutawatir. That is what's meant by khabar al-ahad. So, for example, as we've explained in our lessons on al-Bayquniyya, when we say what is the definition of hadith hasan, some people say it's a beautiful hadith, a fair hadith, a good hadith. It's hadith that's popular. It's hadith that's collected in Sunan Abi Dawood. It's no. Hadith hasan, ma lam yajma', he says, is the hadith which is what? Not hadith sahih. Or let's not even use that example. Let's scratch that, as we would say. Let's use a better example. A hadith da'if. That's a much better example. Hadith da'if is a hadith that has a bad meaning. A hadith that's rejected. A hadith that the Shia report. A hadith that is on the tongues of the general people. Ma lam yajma' shurut al-hadith al-hasan bifaqti shartin min shurutihi. It's the hadith that does not reach the grade of what is called hasan. And it didn't reach this grade of hasan, not by all of the conditions being missing. It's totally bogus, it's totally fabricated. La, meaning one or more, at least one condition, and that's enough to exclude it from being hadith hasan. It is scientifically classified as hadith dhaif. Everybody clear on this? Bidnai ta'ala. So khabar al-ahad is not a hadith that's weak. It's not a hadith that's bogus. It's not this. It's that which is not mutawatir, according to the author. And it's very important, as we say all the time, for us to be as scientific as possible in our understandings, in our definitions, and us to avoid sloppiness and to be as tight as possible. Moving forward, the author says, hukmuhu. What's the ruling of the khabar al-ahad? Is it rejected? Is it accepted? Do we take it in issues of aqidah? Do we take it in issues of salah, fiqh, hukum? What is the ruling? The author says, يفيد العلم النظري أي العلم المتوقف على النظر والاستدلال. It said it gives us the fact that it proves to us and it gives us that which is called al-ilm al-nadhari. Al-ilm al-nadhari. Which basically means it's the knowledge that comes after investigation. It's a type of certainty, as if he's saying. A type of sureness that comes after we've looked and investigated, after we've scratched beneath the surface and we've dug deep and we find out the chains are there, the men are trustworthy, the reporters are accurate, there's no hidden defect, it's this and it's that. Then we come to the conclusion that the Prophet ﷺ said these words. The Prophet ﷺ allowed this to take place. the Prophet ﷺ looked like that, or he dressed like this, or he ate like that, or he was with his wives like this and like that, we come to the conclusion that isn't something which is an absolute must and necessity in the beginning. In other words, as if they're saying it was possibly accepted or possibly rejected. But after investigation, we've scientifically proven that it's accepted or rejected. An example of this would be in a courtroom, a court of law. We've proven that this, the person who's on trial, all right, the suspect, the one who's accused of this trial, the defendant, or whatever the case may be, he's been accused of this, he's on trial for this, all right, and we have the evidence, whether it's eyewitness report, whether it's testimony from this one, he himself confesses, whether it is clear forensic evidence, whatever the case may be, corroboration, all right, whatever the case may be, whatever term is used, we've scientifically proven that this suspect is no longer a suspect, but he is now proven guilty, and he did commit this crime, whether it's murder, rape, fraud, whatever the case may be. This person, he did kill this man. We have fingerprints, we have blood, we have saliva, we have DNA, we have this, we have that, we have the camera, we have the different times, okay, concept of alibi, so on and so forth. It all proves that this man is guilty. He did it. And it's been proven scientifically in a just and fair system, as if we know yaqeenan that this man did it. But the yaqeen or the ilm, whatever term is used, is a very, very, very long discussion, and it can get very sticky. I'm trying to avoid complications. Is that we can prove that this man did it, but the proof only came after investigation, after we sat down and we drilled and grilled the witnesses, and we cross-examined, and we went to the laboratory, and we looked under the microscope, and we looked into his blood and his DNA, and so on and so forth. He did this crime, no doubt. So this is what the author is calling al-ilm al-nadari. Al-ilm al-nadari, and it's not necessarily al-ilm al-yaqini, nor is it necessarily al-ilm al-dururi. Khair, inshallah, hopefully that's clear. Moving forward. He says, so therefore, that is the ruling, is that if it's authentic, and if it's proven with the context clues, with the investigation, then it does give a type of ilm. Now, the topic has become very controversial with regards to Ahlul Kalam, with regards to the Imma of Hadith, Ahlul Bid'ah, okay, the different firaq, the different groups of the past, the ancient Islamic or Muslim groups, okay, of the Ummah that dealt with philosophy, and psychology, and rhetoric, and the Greeks, and the Romans, and the Egyptians, and the Persians, and the Indians, with regards to Kalam, all right, okay, and the concept of the Nazar, all right, and we all know what happened in the history of the Muslims, the different books that were taken to the Caliphate, the different books that were translated into Arabic, the trials and tribulations of Imam Ahmad, saying the Quran is created. We all know about the Mu'tazila, the Jahmiyyah, Kullabiyya, the Ash'ariyya, all right? And how these different people were affected by these different theological and theoretical debates and arguments, all right? Okay, the Sufiya, and so on and so forth, all right? The different madaris of theology, and not even that, even the Arabic language, and just affirming Allah's existence and affirming Iman and affirming Islam, all right? And the different wars that were fought, I mean, speaking verbally, okay, with regards to what is khabar ahad, what is mutawatir, if we have hadith about the punishment in the grave, if we have hadith about seeing Allah in the hereafter, hadith about Allah Azza wa Jalla's nuzul, quote-unquote heavenly descent, all right, the different attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, the sinful Muslims being taken out of the hellfire, and then this goes on. Are these hadiths accepted? Are they rejected? Are they mutawatir? Are they ahad? That's a long discussion, and that's something that has to be dealt with in a separate lecture with regards to al-hadith and what was their position on the Prophet ﷺ's words. Did it have to be reported by a certain amount of people, or did they take it as long as it was scientifically authentic and correct? And this whole entire discussion of ahad and mutawatir, where did it come from? Did it come from al-hadith, or did it come from Ahl al-Kalam and the effects of those people? That's very, very, very long discussion. What's important is Ahl al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Ahl al-Hadith, without these different foreign and weird alien terms, they accepted the Kalam of the Prophet ﷺ if it was scientifically proven to be authentic. They accepted the Prophet ﷺ, the statements that were narrated and passed down from him and attached to him, if it was scientifically proven, whether it was ahad or mutawatir, and whether it was about aqidah, whether it was about amal. Rather, the hadith which were considered to be weak, the hadith which weren't that strong, if they were implemented by the Sahaba and practiced, or even if the Sahaba weren't implementing that specific hadith, but if the action was acted with the people they were practicing in the early days of Islam. Alright, so that's a very, very, very long, detailed discussion. Khairan, inshallah. Moving forward, number 3. The author says, أقسامه بالنسبة إلى عدد طرقه. We want to stop here with regards to the different types of ahad, with regards to its turuq, its chains of narrations. Allah Azza wa Jalla surely knows best. Jazakumullahu khairan for listening.